and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Hello, I'm Jason Pennypacker from New Jersey Coasters, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, I'm Jacopo. I'm the Thrills United Coaster representative from Rome, Italy, and you are listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hello, my name is Paul Cooper from Thrill Voice Photography, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, I'm Grace Peacock, Director of Communications at Canada's Wonderland, and you are listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Coaster Challenge podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and lend us both your Coaster Challenge podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can drive all your tears. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please, secure your hats and glasses and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your hosts, Andrew Locke.
This is Andrew. I've got a special guest from across the world here today. Pretty far distant guest, one of the probably the furthest away guests that we've had here on the show. And our first guest from this particular country, I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Marc from Switzerland. How you doing, Marc?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Andrew.
Awesome. Glad you to stay up here late, given the time difference, and talk to us today. So first thing we'd like to have you do, Marc, is, of course, I know you. We've known each other for a while now. I've hung out a couple times, but our listeners probably don't know you, not all of them at least. So why don't you tell us about yourself and your love of parks and coasters?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Marc. I am from Switzerland. I'm 22 years old. My home park is Europa Park. I lived in Switzerland my entire life. I started riding coasters since like my first few years, even before I remember or even before I could think clearly. I rode coasters. I have many memories from Europa Park, and I've been there so many times. And coasters coasters and theme parks really only began later in my life. Like, I am 22 now, but they only started to be really relevant in my late, or like when I was about, 15 years old. I only then gained interest of roller coasters. So that's pretty much that, yeah.
Gotcha. So you said just a few years old when you rode your first coaster. Did you go with your parents, or what was that?
Usually we would go, there are a couple of fairs around our town. There's one big fair, all those big fairs in Europe with all the flat rides and all. And I remember my first coaster actually was a small little powered coaster at our local fair, but then we would also go to Europa Park every year, at least once, or probably just once every year. And we went there when it was just a smaller theme park, not very well known, not the market or like the very large coasters that we have now. And the one visit that we would go there every year, as I said. And there was just not as much to do as there is now, but it was still a fun park, and that's that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and we'll probably be talking more about your park yet later, I'm sure, with various questions, knowing your preferences and history and all that. So and certainly it must have been a different place, because using the word small and Europa Park, those, you cannot use those together nowadays. So
I realized
Yeah.
that is a bit something.
What would you say, Mark, is the coaster that you've ridden in your life that has scared you the most? You were the most, most anxiety about before riding.
Blue Fire at Europa Park. I told you when we were at Europa Park, I told you all
Yeah.
that stuff, but for the viewers, so Blue Fire Mega Coaster is a motorized multi-launch coaster, and I was really, I think it was 2010 when we were at the park, and there was this big new coaster at Europa Park, and I was really scared of riding it because it had inversions and a launch, and I was like super scared of that. And so we
Right.
went to the park with my family, like my mother, my brother. Yes, I have a brother, and my stepdad. And so we went to the park, and I actually chickened out on riding the coaster at first, and just observed it or like watched it go. And then when my brother and stepdad came back from their first ride, I took up the courage and I decided to join them for a second ride. And as soon as like we were in the queue and as closer as we got to the station, my nerves were building up. I still remember my hands feeling sweaty, but as soon as that launch kicked in, it was all gone. Like I had, can I say, I had that high, and all fear was gone. And from then on out, I was like practically seeking, or like I was having the fun of my life, and that's how I got over the fear.
Nice. Okay. And you said that was in 2010.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
before Rogan
So
was there.
yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So that was you're about 10 years old.
I don't. I was 9. I was 9.
9. Okay, 9
Yeah,
years old. Wow, it's pretty young. Okay. Now, was that your first launch coaster?
yeah, that was my first launch coaster.
Okay, and it was your first coaster with inversions?
Yeah, that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because when you talk about people's fears with coasters, it's usually one of three things: inversions or height or launches, like fast speeds or acceleration. And generally when people kind of break their fears on coasters, they like David told you before we start recording, he was afraid of inversions, and he went on a coaster, California Screamin', now Incredicoaster, which only has one loop. So that was a good kind of step up coaster for him to kind of face that fundamental fear. But you got on a coaster that is has a launch and has inversions, all those things you didn't do. So I definitely understand why you were intimidated by it when you chickened out, like you said, the first time. So your dad and your stepbrother got off of it, and then you decided to have the courage to get on it. Was it because of what they told you about it, or the reaction to it, or?
No, they basically just said that was an awesome ride, and I would really miss something if I wouldn't join them for a third ride. Second
Okay,
ride.
yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit of like a peer pressure. We see that a lot. Like, we're telling you, like, hey, come on, you're really going to enjoy this, and
Yeah,
okay,
it
that
was
makes a lot of sense.
sort of peer pressure, but also I really wanted to go on it because I would regret not going on it if I wouldn't have. So,
Right. Yeah. When we give into fear in life, we miss out on things. Whether it be a job that you didn't, you got nervous about interviewing for, or applying for, asking someone out on a date, whatever it may be, miss out on things by being afraid. So you said that your fear disappeared as soon as the launch happened, which makes sense. Because that it's a pretty good launch. It's before Ride to Happiness, Blue Fire was my most impressive mock launch. I'm used to these kind of weaker launches, mock coasters here in the U.S. We don't have the good mock coasters like you guys do. Hopefully that changes. But so I totally get it. So talk to me about how you felt after you got off Blue Fire for the first time. What were you thinking? What were you feeling?
So it was actually pretty funny. So I mentioned how my brother actually rode it with my stepdad once, and I chickened out. So they rode it again, but with me. And right after we got off, I wanted to jump in line again because it was so much fun. But I literally wanted to marathon it because before I even knew what marathoning a coaster was like. But they said, no, there's so much else to do at the park. Let's return later. So, but I was insisting for like an hour, a good hour or so to go back and ride it again because I was just so blown away.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You had a good reaction to it. So, since riding Blue Fire, have you had any fears of riding new coasters you hadn't been on yet? How have things been different for you?
Well, definitely not fears, but I kind of had respect for some new or for some other coasters, like Carajo at Erlebnis Park Trip Thrill. I definitely this was my second launch coaster, I think. Yeah, pretty much. And I heard that this launch is going to be even stronger. I wrote this first in 2021. No, wrong, 2020. And I just heard that the launch is going to be much more intense than the one on Blue Fire. And I was a little bit scared, but I also knew it wouldn't be that bad. But I still had some sort of respect. And then also when I rode Fly for the first time, or when I went to ride Fly for the first time, it was my first flying coaster, so I didn't know how it was going to feel. And so I also had a little respect from that position or from that concept. So, but ever since that, I've grown a pretty, like, how do you say? I didn't have any more fears, and I was, it just...
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, Fly, because I've of course been on Fly, so I can relate to that one. I've not been to Trip Stroll yet. You did, obviously there's a lot of mystery with Fly, in terms of the loading system, and you're in a show building, and you don't really see the ride once you're inside, and you've never been on a flying coaster, so a lot of mystery and new stuff there. But you were not afraid of Fly like you were of Blue Fire.
No, definitely not, because I have gotten quite a lot of experience with riding coasters at close parks in my close proximity, so I knew what I was getting myself into. I just have never done the concept of a flying coaster, so that's one thing that just scared me. But it definitely wasn't on the fear level of Blue Fire. So
Okay. Now, by the way, you've been mentioning, maybe it's just coincidence, a lot of launch coasters. Blue Fire, Coaster Trip Stroll you mentioned, Fly. Are you more into launch coasters than, say, conventional lift hill coasters?
It really depends if you have, of course, a good first drop on a roller coaster, then I would obviously take it over a drop. But launch coasters just happen to be the coasters that most changed or were significant in my story. There was actually the point in 2012 where I first rode Silver Star. I was just tall enough to get on Silver Star, and I was actually also quite scared of that because it was really, really tall. Now, I don't have a fear of heights, but that drop just still looked intimidating. And even though I liked riding coasters, I knew how fun it was and all, I still had respect from that height. Like, I go in with a lot of respect for every new coaster that I ride, no matter how big or how fast or how forceful or whatever it is. So
Right. Interesting. So just actually, while I'm thinking of it, so because I know you know a lot about the Europa Park. So of course, Europa is owned by the Mach family, and most of the coasters there, not all, are Mach coasters. In fact, some of them are even prototypes of Mach coasters. So Wodan, of course, that's a GCI, but Mach doesn't really make wooden coasters, so it makes sense they would work with another company like GCI. So do you think that given just the time frame of when Mach had Silver Star installed, they weren't really doing hyper coasters yet. Do you think that that's why they went with B&M, or like, do you think if they were to build a hyper coaster now, they would build their own coaster?
I think, we see that Mach can do now hyper coasters. I mean, we see that with DC Rivals Exodus.
Right.
There were actually, I don't know if you know that, but there were actually plans to go with another unknown manufacturer and have a completely different layout. But I imagine if they wouldn't have built a hyper until like 2020 or something like that, they would definitely have built their own hyper coaster. And I'm not going to mention like anything else. I think Silver Star is definitely not ideal. I would much rather have a Mach coaster, but Silver Star is really, really popular, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good coaster. It's not the best B&M hyper that I've been on. It's a solid one, but with it, as much as I've heard friends of mine that have been on DC Rivals rave about it, I would love to see Silver Star be like a DC Rivals and be a Mach hyper, but it is what it is. But anyway, so I was just curious to get your perspective on that. So, conquering your fears on Blue Fire, how would you say that impacted your life?
Well, it definitely impacted my life in having now a main hobby. Like, if I wouldn't have ridden Blue Fire, I would have looked for another way to take up my free time. Obviously, now I spend a lot of time riding roller coasters, going to theme parks, and designing my own coasters in No Limits. And if that didn't happen with Blue Fire, like if I for some reason decided roller coasters aren't a thing for me, I obviously wouldn't be here. So now that I've ridden Blue Fire, it spiraled down into all those events that have followed since, and obviously this takes up most of my time now. So
so basically, it makes sense. By conquering your fear on Blue Fire, you developed a passion for coasters and parks, and it gave you this hobby. Yeah, sure makes a lot of sense. So if we take a step back from just the fear and facing your fears on Blue Fire and so forth, how would you say that coasters and theme parks have had a significant positive impact on your life?
For sure, Europa Park is my home park. It's always been that way. And it's definitely, Europa Park definitely feels like my second home. I think a lot of coaster enthusiasts can relate to that, that their home park sort of feels like a second home. Like for me personally, I feel like very comfortable being there. Like I forget all my worries when I'm there. I forget all my problems. I just feel well there, and if I'm there, that is my happy place. I can just be there and not ride any ride. I can just be there and be happy. So that's that.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense. And some of the things you mentioned there about not worrying about things and getting an escape from life and your life, that's what we call theme park therapy. And whether it be riding a coaster or just enjoying the theming, going on amazing dark rides like like Pirates of Batavia, it just draws your attention. The sights, the sounds, even the smells, like the cinnamon room, which is so intense in a good way. It keeps your attention on what's going on, the fun you're having, and you get to a break from whatever stress is in your life. So it's a good thing. So yeah. So next few questions are some fun questions. And I know you are, like me, you're not afraid to share your opinion on things. You're really good about that. So even if it's a hot take, and that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. So first question, this is always a fun one, is what has been your craziest moment on a coaster?
Yeah, so you sent me all those questions a couple of weeks in advance, and I wasn't really sure what was meant by that, but I have some bullet points written up. And I also told you that in when we were at Europa Park, but I rode Blue Fire 30 times in a row without getting off. That's probably the craziest experience that I've had, 30 times in a row at night without getting off my seat. And that was like literally heaven for me. But there also was that one time where I got evac from Euromir. Like I was stuck in the spiral lift hill for like 30 minutes, and then we had to get evac because there was a power outage for a short moment, and then we had to walk down the entire spiral. Like we were pretty close to the top, and we had to walk down all the spiral, and it took like, I don't know, 8 minutes or something like that to walk down, and that was also pretty crazy. But I have a lot more stories that I could share that would fit this question, but we would sit here.
Yeah, but those are, yeah. Thank you. No, those are pretty crazy stories. That's pretty extreme marathoning on a coaster. That's one of the most popular coasters in the park. So not easy to necessarily marathon a coaster like that from what I've seen. So that's pretty crazy. And then the other story about evacs. I mean, evacs are coaster enthusiasts. We seek them out. They're flexes for us. And we've had some other people with this question talk about some evacs, but that's a pretty impressive evac. With that unique spiral lift system and really pretty tall and inside that structure, and you got evac towards the top. That's that walking down the spiral staircase. The only thing I've done like that in my life is I once went to the Statue of Liberty in New York, and it's a spiral staircase to go up it, and that's the only time I've done like a spiral staircase for like a long distance. It's pretty crazy though. Yeah, I can understand that what that was like for you. Yeah. So I think I know the answer to this next question, or I think you might even have two answers knowing you, perhaps. But what would you say is your favorite coaster?
How did you know that I have two answers? How did you know that?
Because I know you.
Okay.
And I know what both answers are going to be. I know it, but hey, I know the point is not that I know you; it's that you're getting introduced to our audience here. So go ahead and tell us those two launch coasters that are
Yeah, favorite coaster can be interpreted in two ways. As my all-time favorite coaster and my actual number one. My all-time favorite coaster as of now, you probably know it, is Blue Fire. I told you how much I love this ride. I marathoned it 30 times in a row. I am pretty. I'm like I have a. I don't want to brag with my Instagram following, but I'm pretty well known as that Blue Fire crazy guy. And yeah, Blue Fire. I told you that everything started for me with Blue Fire, and that's pretty much the reason why I love this coaster so much. But also because it consistently gives me a fun ride. It consistently has good forces. Like, I have never had a ride that disappointed me, unlike some other coasters where you have some good days or bad days, or good hours or bad hours where they run slow. I always had a good ride. And I also really love Blue Fire because Blue Fire doesn't have the best reputation in the coaster enthusiast community, and I think that it doesn't deserve all the hate that it gets. It's not the most forceful coaster, but it's also not forceless. People who say that, I don't understand. But yeah, those are all the reasons why I love Blue Fire. And now my actual number one coaster.
Before you get to your other answer, let's maybe just kind of talk through what you said about your. So basically, you're identifying Blue Fire as kind of your sentimental number one, your sentimental favorite, right? Which makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And it was your first. It was the coaster that made you an enthusiast. You've gotten so many rides on it. One of your craziest moments was your 30 rides in a row without getting up. But I totally get it. And Mark, this from the last time we hung out, which was in the end of December, right before the new year at Europa Park, at your home park. Yeah. And I had ridden Blue Fire before, and I agree with everything you said. First of all, as I've ridden that all throughout the day, you and I together, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and it's very consistent. It's like it's very much a world class coaster, in my opinion. A good world class, like top tier coaster is one that you can sit at any seat and you can ride any time of day and get an awesome ride on it. And I've never had a bad ride on Blue Fire. Great rides, great launch, great layout. Great inversions, good airtime over that overbank in the beginning, at the top is great. And, there's just so many great moments on it. And, and then those night rides we got when I was there in December, which is one of the reasons why I came to Europe, to get epic night rides at Phantasialand and especially at, Europa Park as well. With that lighting package, and it's just, they're great night rides in general, but that lighting package is stunning. And, for me, it doesn't help that blue is my favorite color too. But no, I think Blue Fire is one of the most underrated coasters in the world. And that not to be named controversial YouTuber doesn't know what he's talking about, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we're talking opinions, but I don't get it. I mean, there's so many coasters that Mach has made that are nowhere near as good as Blue Fire. Like pretty much almost all the Mach coasters here in the US. Blue Fire is much better than Copperhead Strike, for example, in my opinion. But so, yeah, I totally get everything you said. I couldn't agree more. And as my kind of top coaster list changed quite a bit because of my visit to Europe in December, riding Ride to Happiness for the first time, my epic night rides on Terran, but also those night rides on Blue Fire. It pushed it into my top 25, and with almost better part of 600 coasters now on my list. I mean, that's top 25 is like really high up there. So I couldn't agree with more with everything you said. So now let's talk about your kind of actual best coaster in the world, non-sentimental.
Yeah, so my actual number one right now is Ride to Happiness. At Plopsaland Japan, it's been very talked about. Everyone that has ridden it has it very highly ranked on their coaster list, and that's actually quite funny because I went to Plopsaland Japan on a quite spontaneous trip. I hit up one of my friends, and then we were like, Plopsaland is one of the only parks that is open during the off season. Want to just go ride to Happiness? And he was like, yeah, let's go. So we hopped on a train, 10 hours both ways to go to the park and go back home. So we rode a train through the night, and then I had half an hour of sleep, and then I rode Ride to Happiness, and it ran really, really slow. It was ridiculously slow. I rode it 2 weeks before it stalled on the top hat. There was a incident where it stalled on the top hat. I rode it 2 weeks before when it was crawling through the layout, and yet it still was good enough to make it to my number one spot. And when this was the case, it ran slow, but it was still my number one. I can't wait to rewrite it on its full speed, and I can't imagine what happens. And I'm excited to do that because I'm actually going on an ERT this summer, and I'm so excited to ride it again with full potential.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yes, that's right. You're going back during that. I was thinking of something else. I was thinking of when you're going to go to Wallaby, you're going to go to that music festival,
that's
right?
Something else. Yeah,
that's something else. I was confusing the parks, but I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about it when you go this summer, because my first time riding it, the only time I've been to Plopsa was on Christmas Day, which you would think, oh gosh, cold Christmas time, off season like you, but they've corrected the issues that they had with it, that prior winter. Again, where they had the incident where it stalled. And that was, right around the time you wrote it. And I have many things that I can say and have said about Ride to Happiness running slow is not one of them. So yeah, you're going to have the time of your life. It's already cemented as your number one, but you're going to be ecstatic, and hopefully that ERT is it daytime or nighttime or what time? What time of day is it?
It's after the park closes. We actually did a ERT on Expedition GeForce this past September, and the same group now decided that we want to do an ERT on Ride to Happiness, and we only chose that coaster because they are both in Plopsa parks, like, you know, the same park chain, and they are really easy to work with to organize ERTs, and that was the only logical step to do.
I see. How much is it? What, an hour, 2 hours? How much ERT you're going to get?
On Expedition GeForce, we did 90 minutes, and on Ride to Happiness, I don't know how much. I think it will also be 90 minutes, but I
okay. How big is the group that's doing the ERT?
We're gonna fill both trains, I think. That is 16 riders per train. We're gonna have 32 people.
Okay, so you'll be able to stay on them for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's gonna be something. And have you had night rides on it?
No, I did not.
Oh my gosh! So you're going to get the ERT. You're going to get the much faster performance, speed, pacing, and so forth. Now that it's been fixed, and you're getting the night ride. Wow, you're going to be in heaven. I cannot wait to see your reaction.
It's going to be a night ride because the park closes at like 6 or 7, and in summer, go down until like 8, 9, 10 p.m. or something like that. So
maybe your last ride or two, maybe it'll be night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad either way that I get to ride to Happiness at full speed. So that's the good thing.
No, that'll be fantastic. I guess I'm looking forward to your reaction. That's great. And Ride to Happiness is the best mock coaster in the world that I've experienced. Again, I've not ridden DC Rivals yet, or Helix, but I'm riding. Yeah.
I can't wait to ride Voltron at Europa Park.
Oh yeah, that's going to be exciting. That'll be next year. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be riding Helix this summer. I'm doing a Coaster Crew event. For Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and all that. And I've heard good things about it. But it's going to really have to be something special to beat Ride to Happiness. But we'll see. But so on the other end of the spectrum for you, Mark, what would you say is your least favorite coaster?
Here come one of the hot takes that you mentioned. I have done a Vekoma SLC, so you might think it's that, but I actually have that Vekoma SLC in my top 20. My least favorite coaster is actually an Interpark Whirlwind. It's a portable coaster made by Pinfari, and it's that one roller coaster with a ridiculously small Immelmann and triple helix. Austin Amusement Insider rode one of these when he was in Germany. I don't know. It's really hard to explain. You might have to pull up a picture, but it's a ridiculously small inverting coaster. It does 2 laps, and it has over-the-shoulder restraints. It was made by Pinfari. That's just a recipe for disaster. And I regret riding that coaster, actually.
All I can think right now is painful. That's all I can think of. Pinfari's. Yeah.
I rode this coaster when, I mentioned that we have fairs around here. There is Basel Herbstmesse, and I rode this back in 2010. Once and one time only. In 2010, when I was 10 years old. And when I think about it and try to rank it higher in my coaster ranking, I just think back how much it hurt, how bad of a time I had, and no, thank you.
Pinfari's are among, in my opinion, Pinfari is the steel equivalent of Roller Coaster Corporation of America who made the worst wooden coasters, i.e. Bandit, which is really bad. So, I mean, Finfari is just one of the worst steel coaster manufacturing company. It's just awful. But I've never ridden a good Finfari. But yeah, so I can understand, having not ridden that coaster you mentioned. I've not, can't relate to it directly, but I can imagine how bad it was. And yeah, I'll have to ask Austin what he thought of it. I'm good friends with him. I actually just saw him last night.
It's actually, Austin actually rode the exact same coaster that I rode. Ask him about Cobra at Freizeitland Geiselwind. That's the exact same coaster. It got relocated. And he rode the exact
same thing. The same exact one.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask him. Yeah, I was saying I just saw him last night, but again, I didn't know to ask him about this last night. But yeah, and by the way, do you, Austin he's been on the podcast before. He's well known in the community with his an amazing talent for No Limits and Planet Coaster and so forth, with his concept POVs and just renderings in general. And I know that's one of your passions. You talked about that earlier, and you share stuff with me. Do you ever talk to Austin, like kind of share kind of thoughts about modeling the coasters, or get advice from him or anything like that?
No, I actually, we don't talk too much. I only once messaged him how I like that he ranks Blue Fire much higher. Once again, we're back at Blue Fire, but we don't talk too much for that, because I don't know.
Yeah,
I would really love to meet him, because he seems like a cool person.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, he's an awesome guy. Very, very down to earth. I mean, he has more Instagram followers than, many more than the aforementioned YouTube channel we talked about earlier, and well deservedly, mind you. And he's really built up a huge following. I mean, I've been friends with him since late 2018, when he was just getting his channel started before he moved to Orlando, and how his channel has grown. YouTube, Instagram, etc. is really amazing, and I'm really proud of him. And he deserves it. He works really hard. He not only does he do great POVs and concept POVs, but he does great videos. He does great, real world video content and vlogs and things like that. And he really covers the parks well too. But yeah, when you come to Orlando, finally, definitely have to introduce you to him. He lives only about a mile away from me, so I do see him periodically. But I encourage you to reach out to him more. And whenever you have any questions about No Limit stuff, or looking for advice or whatnot, because he's very friendly, loves helping people. So yeah. But anyway, just curious that you mentioned that. So thanks for kind of going through your favorite, least favorite, crazy moments. Some good stories there. So thank you for that. So now I want to talk to you about a couple of questions that I'm asking you specifically. I try to personalize each of the interviews that I do to some degree or another. And I knew what I needed to ask you about. It was obvious. So, we've talked about home parks, and everyone is fond of their home park. But in my opinion, in your case, you kind of take how passionate you are about your home park to the next level. So kind of tell our audience kind of what you do with your home park and so forth. That's different.
So as I mentioned, my home park is Europa Park, and this past year I've kind of found a side quest or a side hobby, which is like Europa Park is a pretty huge park. Like, it's one of the biggest in Europe, actually the second biggest after Disney in Paris. But I realized that when I go to a new theme park, I'm quite overwhelmed at first, and I don't know what to do. So I decided to just post on my story. If you go to Europa Park your first time, reach out to me, and I would happily guide you through the park, because I know a lot of things about Europa Park, a lot of tips and tricks and all of that stuff, hidden paths, when to ride which coaster, and I want to make the first day of certain of when enthusiasts visit the park for the first time, I want to guide them through the park as best as I could with my tips and tricks that I know to make their first day much more memorable and much more easy and less intimidating, because having over 100 attractions is quite overwhelming. You don't know where to start. And with all the tricks that I know, I try to really paint a good picture or a good first impression by using the tricks that I know to really make the first day not as troubling as when you would go there alone. So that's really my goal, just helping people comprehend the size of this park. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Mark, yeah, absolutely, and that's fantastic. And you did that with me the first time we met. We talked in advance, and several friends of mine who we had met earlier that summer last year, they had told me about you, and they posted so positively about you, how helpful you were. And so Anthony, in particular, one of those friends I talk to all the time, I asked him about you. I said, "Oh yeah, Mark's awesome. You should reach out to him. He's a really nice guy." And so you and I started talking before I went out there for the first time in October, and then we met up that first day, and it was an awesome time. And then we hung out again in December, and yeah, you are, I'm not trying to, it's not like an advertisement, but it sort of is. We're here in an interview here. I encourage all of our listeners. Well, first of all, separate from Mark here, I encourage all listeners, if you talk about planning trips and what parks to go to and bucket lists and all this and that. Germany has one of the most incredible 1-2 punches of park lineups in the world. And I've been all over the world. I've not been to all the parks. A lot of parks I haven't been to, but I've been to some of the what are considered the best. And the combination of Phantasialand and Europa Park, it cannot be beat. On my parks ranking list, Phantasialand's number 1, and Europa is number 5. And number 5 is a very good ranking for all the parks I've been to. And fantastic parks. You got to hit both of them. And along the lines of what Mark mentioned, kind of alluded to, he's talked about spending your first day with him. So I encourage all of our listeners to reach out to Mark. You'll learn at the end of the interview, like we do with all of our guests, how to get a hold of him. He's very easy to contact, and coordinate things in advance. So he'll do his best with his schedule to meet up with you. But to his point, your first day, Phantasialand and especially Europa Park. First time you visit those parks, you've got to spend more than a day there. Europa Park in just a day, it would be awful, and you would miss out so much. And so, it's good to spend your first day with Mark. He'll show you tips and tricks. He'll take you on all the coasters, even some of the other rides. But like anyone, Mark, he likes certain things and not others. For example, Mark's not big on water rides. He's not big on shows. But he'll kind of show you where things are, and you can answer questions, and so that way that first day you'll kind of do a lot of stuff he likes, which is most of the major things, the coasters and everything. But your second day you can kind of revisit the ones you liked and do some of the other stuff. Yeah, again, Europa Park has so much to do, and so much of which is such high quality and so unique. So again, I'm kind of talking you up, Mark, but you deserve it. And yeah, I can relate to what you do, by the way, Mark, because whether it be my home parks or just parks I know well, one of my favorite things, period, to do in life, like absolutely favorite things, is to take a friend on a coaster that I love that they've not been on yet, or even better. So I guess the true favorite is to take someone to a park they've never been to before and show them around and play tour guide and help them and enjoy that park that I go to so much through their eyes with their excitement for the first time experiencing it. So is that kind of part of what it is for you, Mark, is you like to see people's reactions to your home park?
There's definitely a big park, but I also know from first-hand experience, like I went to Phantasialand and for the first time in 2021, and everything was so overwhelming. If I wouldn't have had my friend who went there a year before Fly opened, I would have been way too overwhelmed and wouldn't have known what to do. And so I wanna make it, as I mentioned before, easy for people to like have a good first day at the park. I know the best times when to ride which coaster, when the shortest lines will be at which attraction. I wanna make people just have to not think about things that are like minuscule, like wait times and what to ride next and all of that. But I also really like seeing people's reactions. Like when for example, when we first got on Blue Fire, I really wanted to see their reaction and how much they like the coaster and whatever. This is definitely a big part, but there are so many other small reasons why I do this. Naturally, because hanging out with other enthusiasts at a park is much more fun than when you go alone. Sure, sometimes going alone is also good because you can do what you want, but meeting people with the same passion as you like makes a day infinitely better. So yeah, those are
no, absolutely.
some of the reasons.
Yeah, and one thing Mark is also really good at, I didn't mention yet, is not everyone, but most coaster enthusiasts, most park enthusiasts, people listening to this podcast, we like photography and taking photos of coasters and parks, and we're recording videos and upright videos and things like that, which I certainly do enjoy. And Mark loves that. He has good content on his channel to that end. And he's really good about showing you, he's talking about paths and hidden places. He's really good about taking you to places in the park to really film well. I remember one of my favorite moments from our first visit together, Mark, was Wodan, which is an incredible GCI. Well, I think one of my favorites, certainly. You can get so close to Wodan, to the track and to the train, and film in a totally legal public area. And most people wouldn't even know about it. But you do.
Yeah, I have to mention all that getting close to Woden and Blue Fire. We don't hop any park fences and all. All of these places that Andrew just mentioned were accessible by either going off the path for like a few inches and all. So don't hop fences. Stay on the regular park paths that are intended. Don't be stupid. Pretty much. So
absolutely. No, very good point. That's a really good point, Mark. And it's especially important in Europe. Again, this is really for our American audience, which is most of our listeners are here in the US, that in Europe, they don't have people suing parks. It's not like it is here in the US when everyone sues everyone else for things that were really their own fault and things like that. They don't have that kind of culture, which is a good thing over in Europe. So people, if something happens, people take their own responsibility for it. So I'm not saying the parks aren't safe, but you'll see, for example, the rapids rides in Europe don't have restraints. So you have to keep yourself in the boat, and from falling around. And similarly, the pathways, they have fences and particular areas, but they're not as thorough necessarily as the US. So you want to be mindful and be intelligent about things. And again, Mark, he's just taking you on pathways that are kind of go back, but they're public pathways, and you're not going off in the bushes or anywhere unsafe. It's just he's showing you areas of the park that people don't often go, but are publicly accessible. So, but I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. So
actually, one of my favorite places that I'm going to mention is the Blue Fire Garden. Like the place where the back area. And that's I said about when I'm at my home park, I am really happy. I forget all my my problems. That Blue Fire Garden is one of the places that is my favorite place at the park, and I can just sit there, I can go to the park and just sit in that back area, in that back garden, and just be happy. I don't even have to write anything. I can just sit there, and that's one of the places. It's very hidden. If you don't immediately like check all the paths. You have to know where you're going, but yeah, that's definitely a place that I can recommend. But I'll definitely show that to you if you come out to Europa Park. So that's that.
Sure. Yeah, I encourage everyone to reach out to Mark. So, Mark, you've started doing this in the past year or two. So, do you have a rough estimate of how many people you met up with since you started doing this?
I met up with exactly 5 people, Airtime Monkey and Civilian Satellite, Vince.
Yeah, Vince. Yeah.
Then I also met Coaster Dash. He's a kind of big YouTuber. And his brother also joined us. And then, of course, you, Andrew, twice. So, yeah, I only really had 5 people so far. And I'm not intending on stopping anytime soon. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I mean, in my opinion, Mark, you could have a job at Europa Park as a tour guide, as like a VIP tour guide and some that sort of thing. You're very knowledgeable, you also point out
Europa Park. Hit me up, Europa Park.
Yeah, hopefully they're listening. But you also point out all these little hidden like Easter eggs, like Roland Mach. He's he's on the ride of Pirates of Batavia. You see him in one of the sections, and all the history of the history of Europa Park and the Mach family is fascinating. I mean, it's rare that you go to a park that's owned by a company that makes coasters themselves. That's not common. So, and this is the history of Europa Park and how, it's just wild. So Mark, we're talking a lot about Europa Park. So, in your opinion, what do you think makes Europa Park so special?
I mean, I can only talk from my side. I mean, it's the place that it's the theme park that I've been going to since childhood. I connect a lot of childhood memories with that place. But it's also really special because, it's a park owned by a family rather than a big corporation. And this family really focus on having a great guest experience, just operating the park with love, decorating everything like it. You just feel the atmosphere. It's just very, very positive and all. Staff there, they all love to be there. They love their jobs. The employees get treated very nicely. And also the park is not very expensive. It's actually quite cheap. Like they take a lot of how do you say it? They take a lot of pride in having a great guest experience and making guests have a great day over profits, and like they love their guests, and that's really when a park focuses more on guest satisfaction. Sure, money is also really important. Like they also need cash or an income, but they also care about customer experience, and because they care so much about customer experience, a lot of people feel like this place is very special to a lot of people, including me. So I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. And Europa Park is an incredibly special park. The experience is extremely high quality. It's one of the most beautiful parks I've ever been to, if not the most beautiful. It's one of the largest parks that's in the world. I mean, what does it have? 13 coasters, right?
Yeah,
13 coasters. But you have to keep in mind, this is not a Six Flags. This is not a Cedar Fair park. This is a theme park, a highly themed park that has 13 coasters, many of which are fantastic. Wodan, Blue Fire, Euromir, Eurosat, Arthur, even though it's a junior coaster, fantastic. Even the Mach powered family coaster there is great. Their Wild Mouse coaster is fantastic. There's so many good coasters. Pirates in Batavia again, this is a hot take, and listeners know how much I love Disney. And I know you don't, Mark. But Pirates of Batavia is easily better than every Pirates ride that Disney has in the world, except the one in Shanghai. That's right. It is better than the one in Disneyland, as far as I'm concerned. Again, maybe a hot take, and I'm talking about the new version of it, not the one that existed before it burned. It had the fire a few years ago. So I know they made a lot of improvements on it from what Mark told me. But again, great coasters, great dark rides, great water rides. I know, Mark, you're not into shows, but Europa Park has some of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. In a park or out of a park, doesn't matter. Just the quality of entertainment there is absolutely amazing. Another thing, and Mark was actually helpful with this, the food selection at Europa Park is truly second to none. Europa Park, given the nature of it, it celebrates the countries of Europe, and each land is a different European country, and there's quite a few of them. Do you have many lands? Do you have a count of that, Mark?
I know most of the lands, but I probably wouldn't be able to list them all right now. I would probably.
But it's like 15 to 20, right? It's like 15 to 20.
Yeah, something like that. But I think
Yeah,
16 was the number, but I wouldn't be too sure.
I mean, most parks have 3, 4, 5, 6 lands. Not 16. And some of these are bigger than others. But each country has food from that country and a very good selection. And you've got quick service, table service. Mark's not a big fan of, but I love the Food Loop, the coaster themed restaurant where everything's delivered to you by a roller coaster. Really wild experience. Really good food, in my opinion, too. But I got to have some really good Swiss food that, of course, Mark's home country in Switzerland. There's a Swiss section there in the park, and the raclettes, which is the kind of fresh shaved cheese, Swiss cheese with meats or vegetables, and really, really good stuff. But just great food. It's just a beautiful park to walk around. It's a fantastic park to walk around, and it's just such a pleasure to be in that park. And Mark, I totally understand why you get the theme park therapy there, because it's just, you don't have to get on a ride there. You just walk around and be escaping from the world. And the Mock family, they clearly put their heart and soul into that park, and they're very proud of it, and as they should be. It's just an incredible park, and you're fortunate to have it as your home park, in my opinion.
Yeah, so there's quite a weird thing that I have to mention, that I am fortunate to live really, really close to Europa Park, and that this is my home park. In the last couple of years, leading up to 2021, I was kind of, desensitized. Is that how you say that? But the park. Now, don't get me wrong, the park is fantastic, it's beautiful, but every time I would go there up until 2021, it would just feel like another Europa Park visit, and it kind of lost the kind of special place status for me. But then I realized, I was kind of desensitized, it didn't really feel special anymore. But then I realized, hey, wait a second, this is one of the best parks in the world, and you are lucky to live this close to it. And so now I've come to appreciate every visit once again. So that's quite a weird thing that I noticed lately.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of had a reset of your kind of thoughts about the park, and kind of grew a new appreciation of it and better perspective. That's great. And I know one thing you appreciate is, I know you love Phantasialand like I do, but these parks are not expensive to go to, but still, if you want to go to a park a lot, it adds up, even if you're to buy day tickets. And at Phantasialand, you have a choice. They don't offer season passes anymore. They haven't offered them since before COVID. And so it becomes expensive to visit Phantasialand more than a few times in a year. Whereas your home park, Europa Park, they still offer season passes.
Actually, Europa Park doesn't offer season passes anymore because the demand was so high that they reached a number of limits of season passes that they can sell. Season passes at Europa Park are currently not available because there are just so many season passes that they have sold. So they had to.
But you have one, right?
Yeah, I do have one, yeah. But they can
You still
literally
have
not
one. So,
sell any new season passes right now because the demand is
wow.
just so high.
Wow. And I mean, Europa Park has a huge capacity because it's so large and spread out. And
Yeah.
wow, that's crazy that they can't. Wow. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Well, yeah, thanks for talking about Europa Park. And again, I cannot emphasize how special it is. And hopefully, between me talking about it here once again on the podcast and Mark hearing it from Mark as well, listeners are impressing upon how special and unique this park is, and encourage you to learn about it. And of course, go visit it. And if you do, please hit up Mark. He'd happy to make sure your day is special. So, and thank you for that for Mark. So, one of the earliest and oldest, long-standing, if you will, fans of Coaster Challenge was this boy named Dusty, and he and his mom actually were both guests separately on the podcast in season 1. And Dusty is younger than you. You are, Mark. He was about 16, and he sadly passed away this past year. And David's known Dusty for a long, long time, and it hit David especially very hard because Dusty knew him personally, and David knew him personally, and living there also in California where David is. And so David very poignantly wanted us to start asking this next question. So basically, Mark, the framing of this is thinking about mortality, and hopefully you'll live a very long life. You're a young guy, but after your life is complete, and how would you want your family, your friends, colleagues to remember you by? Like, what would you like them to think of when they think of you?
I had this question. You gave me the question, as I already mentioned, a couple of weeks back, and I haven't really thought, I have seen this question quite a lot, but I don't really know what to really say. But I just want myself to be remembered as I am a happy guy, loving I love Europa Park. That's like part of my identity, and I just want, I don't know what to say. Just remember me as a happy dude that lived his life going to Europa Park.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. I mean, you are. I mean, it's sort of. This won't come as a shocker to anyone listening to this, given what we talked about and how you mentioned things, Mark. But not only are you a great person to guide people at Europa Park, you love doing it. You are very passionate about your home park. I mean, all of us actually, not all of us necessarily love our home parks. Some people have regional parks, that aren't so great as their home park, but it's their closest park. Some people don't have many parks near them at all. Maybe just one park, and it's not great, but it's their home park. But you have, Europa Park is a world-class park, one of the best in the world. And, been going there since you were a very young age. You go there all the time, and you're very passionate about it, and it's very understandable. So that's a good way to want to be remembered by. And I'm sure, of all the people, just in the past year, you've had 5 people, as you mentioned, kind of take you up on the offer to have them meet up with you and show them around. And, you're only 23. So you can imagine how many, maybe even hundreds of people through your life you may wind up introducing to Europa Park, and you'll have all these people remembering you in that way that, Mark was this amazing guy that was so generous with his time to show about me his home park. So that's really, really meaningful. So I think that's good. So, Mark, as you know, this podcast is all about theme park therapy. So can you think of any advice that you'd like to give those that are listening in terms of theme park therapy and trying to live a better life, and, in terms of going to the parks?
There's kind of something that I want to mention. I'm not sure if it fits into this question, but
sure.
I see quite a lot of coaster enthusiasts nowadays on Instagram, Reddit, whatever. When they go to a park or when they talk about coasters online, they really just talk about the big stuff, like the big coasters, like the Ride to Happiness, Terran, Fly, all the top-notch, world-class coasters, and they kind of just push kiddie coasters and all to the side and just trash about them. And I, for myself, when I was at Phantasialand, I had to get all the credits and all, because, I'm a coaster enthusiast, I get all the credits. When I rode Reich, then I realized, hey, wait a minute, Reich is just a family coaster, but if you set your mind to it, or if you go into the coaster with the right mindset, you can enjoy every coaster that you want, even if it's just a small kiddie coaster and all. And I just feel like a lot of coaster enthusiasts just are focused on all of those world-class coasters, and all the kiddie coasters are just side quests to get the virtual coaster credit number up. But for me, riding any coaster, like either be it small or big, be it a family coaster or a thrill coaster, just try to have fun on every coaster that you ride, because you're a coaster enthusiast, your passion is roller coasters, and size of the coaster or status of the coaster shouldn't really be a limit to how much fun you have on which coaster. And so I say to a lot of people or that I meet, try to have fun even on the smallest coaster, because if you really set your mind to it, you can have a great time on any coaster. And I certainly realized that with Reich, because it's just a Vekoma family coaster, but I had the mindset of, hey, this is a roller coaster. It might not be the biggest, but I enjoyed these rides that I had really much, because I just went into this coaster with the right mindset. So yeah, try to enjoy every coaster, even though it might be small. Because
I think, Mark, that's really good point. That's good advice, and no one's ever given that advice before. But really, it's powerful advice if you think about it, because you're encouraging people to have a more positive mindset and a more open kind of mind when they're at parks, and giving people a reminder that they can probably enjoy themselves more with that variety and appreciating everything that's there, not just like the number one or two coasters in a park. And it's funny, I was just talking to David about this offline a couple days ago. We were talking about, we have various people, friends, guests that have been on the show, and they're well known for marathoning a single coaster, a certain coaster, and keeping track of re-rides. And these are people, and they're, again, all friends of ours. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they have, thousands of rides on a given coaster. Nothing wrong with that. But that's just not just personal preference. That's not how I am. I keep track of re-rides on Velocicoaster because it's my number two, and it's literally next door to where I live, and it's just fun. I don't really keep track of re-rides besides that. But for me, I like riding all sorts of rides, and that's all sorts of coasters: dark rides, water rides, flat rides. I like enjoying all of it. I don't just go again and again and again on my favorite coaster at a park. And to your point, you mentioned Reich specifically, Mark, which is at Phantasialand. And then this is just an opinion, but I would say Reich is I don't want to say the worst, but the lowest ranked coaster at Phantasialand that I would rank. And it's still a great ride. It's a family coaster. Yeah. It's a family boomerang, non-inverting. But that's how stacked the lineup is at Phantasialand, that what is still a great ride is their weakest coaster, and then everything is up from there. I mean, I think a coaster that some enthusiasts, for example, like to your point, Mark, that wouldn't necessarily spend a lot of time on is another, I think, potentially underrated coaster like Blue Fire, and that's Colorado Adventure. Colorado Adventure is the most incredible mine train coaster I've ever ridden in my life. How forceful.
That one is so good. That one is so good.
Yeah, it's so good. But everyone focuses on, my number one, Terran, my number three, Fly. Yeah, I get it. I love them. But there are so many hidden gems, and I won't say hidden gems, but so many other rides at Fantasyland, at Europa Park, at these parks we're talking about, that are so good. It's good to kind of spread the wealth and just enjoy it all. And so I appreciate that's great advice, Mark.
Can I before we end the podcast, can I just mention Euromir at least once?
Yeah. Please, that's another underrated coaster. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. What do you want to say about it?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention it, give it some credit because it's awesome. I don't know what else to say. I love it.
No, Euromir, you know how much I love Euromir as well. It's a fantastic ride. It's got a great layout, especially the second half is really great positives. The iniquity of it spinning, you can go down the drop, that first kind of bigger drop backwards, which is really cool, and luck of the draw. But it's got a really fun layout. I love the way it looks, the theming of it. Sometimes the music in the station on the lift is really cool, especially Halloween time. It's a great ride. The other thing I want to mention real quick, I forgot to mention earlier, talking about how you're so kind to offer to be a guide for Europa Park. Another reason why that's important, and this comment applies to Fantasyland as well. Both of these parks, they're two of the most amazing parks in the world, and they're both not the easiest parks to get around. Mark talked about, parks being intimidating for the first time. Well, part of the intimidating factor of these two parks is they don't have a hub spoke or circular layout. They're very unique, kind of, in one case, Europa Park, very spread out, but not kind of neatly organized park. And then in Fantasyland, because it's a smaller park, but because it's land starved, it literally rides are built on top of each other. I mean, it's almost like one of the wonders of the world, how the rides are built at Fantasyland, because you can see how they're just stacked and layered on top of each other. It's just incredible how 3D, if you will, so to speak, Fantasyland is, and how it's built up to have all that it has in such a small space. But that also makes it confusing to get around. And it wasn't until the second visit this past December that I started really learning how things are really connected at the park, and had a shortcut and go from one land all the way over here. And similarly, Europa Park, as Mark will show you, Europa Park is so big that it has not one but two separate monorail systems. And these monorail systems, not like Disneyland's, you can very functionally use to get from one side of the park to the other. So very important.
I want to add something to that point. Europa Park is so complicated, and the paths there are so many paths to the point. I know this park pretty well. Like, I know most of the paths, if not all. You know what? That's a lie, not all. There are still some paths that I discovered that I didn't even know existed. Like, there are some paths that I didn't even know. It's so complicated. But also Fantasyland. I have been to this park for a total of 5 days. Luckily, I am one that can quickly memorize a path layout, a coaster layout, and all of that. But if I were to be one person that wouldn't have such an easy time remembering a park layout, like, that would be really like hell for me. I couldn't imagine dealing with a park layout that you don't know. And so that's also one of the reasons, like, making it easier for people to get a grasp of the park layout and all of that. So
yeah, no, absolutely, that's a good point. And it makes a difference. And so you can help people with that, especially at Europa Park. So Marc, thank you so much for taking the time here to talk about your facing fears and your experience with coasters, and of course all your great experiences at Europa Park and especially with Blue Fire, and talking about how you can show people around. And speaking of that, so of course for you to be able to meet up with people, they have to get a hold of you. So for the last thing we always ask our guests is how people can connect with you and find you on social media and so forth.
Yeah, sure. I have an Instagram account, of course, and I also do have a YouTube account. On both, I am named Swiss Coaster Enthusiast. On Instagram, between both of the words or all, like I'm at Swiss_coaster_enthusiast, and on YouTube I'm also Swiss Coaster Enthusiast, just regular. And that Instagram is the best way to contact me. I go on Instagram every 5 minutes to check on stuff, even though I know I checked it already. Like the chances are high that I will see your message within at least 1 hour, and that's definitely the easiest way to contact me. So yeah,
I can tell our listeners from personal experience from talking to you quite a bit on Instagram that you're good about responding and you're on there a lot, and I love Instagram. Instagram is fantastic. It's like Thuzy Central. It's where all the Thuzies are. It's not Twitter. It's really not Facebook. And Instagram is where things are at. So actually, as I like to do sometimes, sometimes I think of advice to give our listeners as well. And here's one of those moments. I know social media can be a positive and a negative, but listeners, if you don't have an Instagram account, and I have a couple Thuzy friends who they won't get Instagram accounts, and I keep trying to tell them to do it. If you don't have an Instagram account, you're really missing out. It's a very positive area. There's not a lot of toxicity like you have on Facebook and Twitter, and there's so many Thuzies on there, and it's just great. A lot of photos and videos, and it's just great stuff. So and again, one of the many great people you can meet on there is Marc. So Marc, thanks for sharing where people can find you. And again, thank you for being on the podcast today. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a nice time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, all at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.